as you're trying to figure things out, you know, those things are plaguing you less because the dream of the world will configure things that will plague you or will entrance you, right? So as we're trying to figure things out of our existence, that the plaguing part of the configuration, it becomes less a viable force, right? That inundates us. So we get to choose our experience by what we do, by our action, rather than our reaction. Because the plague is trying to make us reactive, right? Trying to figure things out is making us active. We're actively participating in finding a solution, which is the essence of enlightenment. That moment of enlightenment where Buddha saw the problem and set on a path to try to figure out a solution. His life changed incredibly from that moment. So all the plagues that he encountered, through the 81 days, he accepted them as challenges rather than as a disease, as a plague, right? So he was able to get through them by that. He was able to see the formation of Mara at the center of the dream of the world, that it is trying to distract us from trying to figure things out. So, and that's basically how he got to the source of his being, to be in that emancipation. He saw what was necessary to become enlightened. So the Toltec was about intending backwards, right? Moving sort of ass backwards by remedial methods of dreaming, stalking, rather than into, and then, more functional methods later with the movements. Those are very functional. Some form of movement that directs your power in a particular way, directs intent. Because as you practice the movement, you get to feel intent in motion and in stillness. You get to make that comparison. Right? So, and that engenders more energy for to give you greater dreaming and stalking experience. So if the movements are working right for you, sometimes you may find something that is weakening you and not making you strong, right? So this is, again, back to the warrior's inventory. You have to be able to discern if what you're doing is making you stronger or is making you weaker. Is it increasing your lucidity, or is it decreasing your ability to be able to move in these realms? So you're going to have a variety of results from tensegrity, of Tai Chi. It's not going to work the same for every person. The one little criticism I have about tensegrity is that there's so many movements, that it becomes dysfunctional, right? But there's enough movements to be able to figure out, well, I can make a comparison, right? I can make the comparison, is this making me stronger or is it making me weaker? By experimenting. This is really about a process, a wider process, a bigger process of existence called reconciliation, where we reconcile things, right? We make comparisons, and from that comparison, a comparison is a mirror image of what you're doing, right? So we're looking into the mirror again. Is that mirror enhancing our image, or is it making us look terrible? You know, is it making us look fatter? Yeah. So, and that's just to really all you need is one essential movement, right, to spur on the warrior spirit. One movement that has the ability to make you stronger, right? That will spur on the warrior spirit, right, to increase that, right? Because where the warrior spirit sees deficiencies, it will automatically create strategies. It'll start trying to solve the problem. So where you have deficiencies, it will start creating sufficiencies, right? So the one basic maneuver where you start to see if your energy is weak or strong is the gateway of light, right? So, if you're feeling nothing, then there's no energy. You're weak. No energy field. But if you start to feel something, you're starting to increase your energy, right? Your energy of sentience, right? And so that energy begins to build, right? And you can actually feel it. You can groom it to become stronger. That's why we focus on the pulse and the energy of the pulse. Is it a strong pulse or is it a weak pulse? If it's a weak pulse, well, it's weak. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's a weak pulse, right? If it's a strong pulse, well, you know the difference because it's strong. And in comparison to the weak pulse, it's much stronger, right? And if on some days, when before you've had experience of a strong pulse and you're producing a weak pulse on that day, well, you know it in comparison. It's another form of a mirror that you're being able to look at yourself at, right? So,
what can you do to strengthen a weak pulse?
Well, there's various things you can do. That will be presented as you start evolving into the stronger energy.
It'll come to you.
It'll produce what's called impeccable maneuvers. And these are visions from the dream of the planet, right? For where you're starting to see into the transparency of the earth. And really the transparency of the earth is essentially the transparency of your own subjective world that's growing, right? So essentially we are a dream of the planet. This physical body is dreamt by the planet from the constituents of its element. Everything we have here is built from the planet, from the raw materials of the planet. So it's a dream built from the planet. So even our physical bodies, it's just a dream of the planet. So, but we have configured it to be solid and rather than fluid, right? The dream of the planet is fluid. The dream of the world is solid. So there's a difference. Getting involved in our more subjective world, bringing that into dominance, introduces us to a more fluid experience of energy. Energy is fluid, right? Matter is solid. Very simple. So we start getting, as we experience energy, we start getting into the quantum universe. The quantum universe is formed of two elemental particles, the pulsar and the photon. The photon is luminosity, and the pulsar is, a functional unit of vitality, right? And so that's the measurement of this pulsar, right? And what we're feeling, the gateway of light, is very important because we're measuring our vitality in that. And so we can increase our vitality by learning to increase our pulse. Right? And that's gained through a subjective entrance into the dream of the planet, where we start perceiving the impeccable maneuvers. Many times we perceive the impeccable maneuvers, but treat it as scenery rather than as strategy. Right? It's important to treat these things as strategy rather than as scenery. Many times you'll see like a spiral, right? And so you'll see like a vision of a spiral galaxy, right? And you might see it moving in a particular direction. Or you might see a wormhole, right, that's going into another direction. And this wormhole is actually moving in a particular direction, right? That's the movement of intent. That is a movement of force. Force equals intent. Intent equals force, right? So how it moves is how we move, right? A warrior doesn't like surrender. The practice of a warrior is to align, right? You make alignments with impeccable maneuvers that you've perceived. And so if you see a movement that's going clockwise or counterclockwise, you make that alignment. You go in that direction, right? So when you see a basic movement, that's a strategy. You could start visualizing that movement as a strategy, and that's a more of an alignment with intent, because intent is what? Movement, right? When you visualize movement, you're visualizing intent, right? So it's a strategic way of utilizing intent. So one of the techniques is, that can be very functional, is what's called creating your own direction in life, right? In which you utilize the visualization of a spiral in motion, right? So the spiral is the basic structure of time, right? Time can be linear, right? It goes in a straight line, but it's going in a straight line in a spiral, right? Because linear time is just one segment of the spiral, right? But basically time is going in a spiral. You could say time is going in a circle, the way the Mayans perceive it, right? Or the Native Americans. But really, when you get from one point back to its origin, you're never there the same way, right? So it's going in a spiral. So we sort of visualize things in a spiral, and one of the protective elements is to, excuse me, Mr. Fly, is to be able to visualize, to understand the action of the motion of a spiral. When it's going clockwise, what does it produce? When it goes counterclockwise, what does it produce, right? And this is, we're making an alignment with the energy body, right? And the energy body is the actual dreamer, right? It's dreaming this existence, right? But it's dreaming it from a different perspective. We're dreaming it from limitation. It's dreaming it from a wider perception of probably the whole life, plus other lives that we are also leading at the same time in the various experiments and games of drama we're playing in other realms. Please excuse me, Mr. Fly. Thank you. Move away. Thanks. He was going in my mouth, so I didn't want that to happen. I didn't want to eat him up. So, here we are again. Mr. Fly is back. Thank you. So we're moving into the awareness of the energy body. And for the energy body, everything is just merely an assemblage, right? So the more we create the assemblage of the assemblage point, the more we are becoming the assemblage form, which is the energy body. And the more it has the ability to add into our existence, to have that dynamic connection between energy body and our our human configuration. So the dreaming double is merely a sort of coming of the energy body, coming and we have an encounter with it in one of its assemblage forms, right? Because it can create a multitude of assemblage forms, right? Because it is an assemblage form. Right? The sorcerer tries to take that position of the energy body, of being the assemblage form, rather than being a human form, while being in the human existence. So that's what constructively starts creating the second attention and the third attention and other attentions. There are other attentions as well. Right?
What's the difference between the second and the third? So let me just check the size of this file. Oh, that's all right. Okay.
Right. The first attention is our normal mundane perception of, restricted, limited perception. Second attention removes one of the barriers, right? We start to perceive how we're the unknowing effect by being more the knowing effect, right? So we're starting to see other forces come into shape, The psychotic, the delusional, are also, the serial killer, are also aware of these things, but they're aware of it in a very unbalanced way, right? Rather than try to figure them out, they try to, they go with it, they surrender to it. So the practice of surrender is not a warrior practice. So if you're a warrior, alignments are what's more worth pursuing, right? Rather than surrender, because you never know what you really surrender to. And a lot of time, the bliss of bliss is in the decline of energy. As you experience the flow of energy going out through the gap, it is a blissful experience. But you are losing energy, right? Until you're just wasted. Then there's no energy left. The warrior is about the conservation of energy. It's about ecstasy rather than bliss. It's about the breaking down of the barriers of perception, right? And coming to terms with the forces that are beyond. So, and try to figure out how to utilize them rather than be used by them. Because being used by them produces the plague. Learning to use them produces the solution. Right. So I see the dreaming double as a temporary kind of intermediary between the energy body, your intelligent self, and your unknowing effect self, trying to bring maybe some new dynamic influence into your life of the non-ordinary. So it's really only a temporary assemblage until, all assemblages are really temporary. So aside from the assemblage point, whose formation in itself is never the same. So it's whatever formation it takes is only temporary until it assumes a new form. Right? And that's really the the only permanent thing. And it does this in a field of luminosity, right? It's the Toltecs have a paradise, right? It's not the dark sea of awareness per se. It's this field of infinite luminosity, where this singular luminous fiber has grown magnificently, with great magnitude. It has accumulated it has grown other luminous fibers. And those luminous fibers have interacted with each other to produce more complex structures called organic crystalline structures, right? And when these become solidified, the solidification of energy rather than the solidification of matter, it produces the talents, the abilities of other attentions. We can actually engineer other attentions from the building of these luminous fibers in this infinite field, where we have access to, great infinite assemblages, right? Because that's what the source of creation is. It's an assembler. Right? It's merely an assembler. It's not a supervisor, and it's not a manipulator, as we imagine the supreme deity to be. Right? That is the mold of man. Right? We're talking about the mold of sentience. Right? The basic format of sentient existence is assemblage. What you can creatively assemble to be functional, right? And that's what all of existence is all about. Everything is just an assemblage. It's a creative endeavor to build something functional, right? Or to build something beautiful, or to build something magnificent, or to build. We are builders, just like the source of creation. And what it says in the Bible, you are, I forget the exact line, you are created in the image and likeness of God. Well, that image is the dream, right? We are created in this dream. It's an image, really. When you leave this world, you see it as a mirror image, a dreaming image, right? And that's what we do. When we dream, we create images, we create worlds out of those images, right? That is the likeness, right? So we are created in the image and likeness of the source of creation. We are assemblage points assembling worlds. And out of our mere image, we can create a dynamic of a world. Right? Did you need to...
I wanted to stop it again.